Thank you for logging on to Black Video News at 8. I'm your host, Dr. Mateen Diop, with a very special report. We are blessed to have with us Student Minister, Regional Minister Robert Muhammad from the Nation of Islam under the guidance of the Honorable Minister Louis Farrakhan here in our city. He just gave a very rousing lecture to African American men, what he called majority men, here in the St. Phillips College. And I wanted to have a few minutes to talk to him and kind of get his take and let him expound a little bit more on what he talked about. But before we get to that...
1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. You've got these digits, and these digits are Arabic numerals. But how could you be studying algorithms and not know that that word is named after an Arab scholar? It's a problem. When we exclude other people's contribution to education. Now, here you have the fall of Rome. You got what you call the Dark Ages, or what they call the Middle Ages. Then you got the Renaissance. Then you got the Enlightenment, right? Okay, what happened in here? It's about 1,000 years of missing history that no one wants to tell you about. Why not? How did you think you just came to this Renaissance? All of a sudden, you just jumped up, and now all of a sudden you begin to be scientific and all of that, and Enlightenment, which led to, of course, the age that we're living in right now? What happened in this 1,000 years? You said it was the Dark Ages of Europe because of the fall of the Roman Empire, particularly in Rome. But there never was a Dark Ages in Spain and Portugal. Because Spain and Portugal were occupied by some people that they call Moors.
That's right.
Now these aren't Arabs. Moor means black. These were Arabs and Africans. And do you know that from 5 to 10% of the Spanish language is Arabic? You're eating fruit. You got any oranges? No, that's an Arabic word. You know, you don't have generals in the Navy, you have admirals in the Navy. You want to know why? Admiral means Lord of the Sea. It's an Arabic word. Your study of the stars and astronomy, your astrolabe, the maps that Columbus used, he got from Muslims and Jews who were map makers for him. What we have to understand is that everybody's contributed to the onward march of civilization. Everybody. And to exclude females, males, blacks, Arabs, Muslims, whomever from that, and to make this thing a whole Eurocentric phenomenon.
Brother Robert, say hi. What's going on, Brother Robert? How you doing?
I'm doing fine. Assalamu alaikum. Peace be unto you, brother.
Wa alaikum salam. Before I get into what your lecture was about, I wanted to ask you, how's the minister's health? Are we going to see him anytime soon back on that lecture circuit?
By the grace of Almighty God, Allah, the Honorable Minister Louis Farrakhan, believe it or not, just had a slight heart attack. I don't know how you have a slight one, but he had a slight heart attack. And by the grace of God, no damage was done to his heart. We got to remember Minister Farrakhan is 80 years old. So they did do operation on him, put some stents into so that his arteries wouldn't be blocked. And then he got an infection, and it prevented him from joining us in Tuskegee, Alabama for the 18th anniversary of the Million Man March. But by the grace of Almighty God, Allah, Mr. Farrakhan is alive, he's well. He was in Indianapolis, Indiana this past Sunday, and he spoke for 2.5 hours. And I mean, it was just a riveting, breathtaking, inspiring, enlightening lecture. And I'm so glad to see and hear from him. And we look forward to perhaps seeing him sometime soon in Texas. Maybe San Antonio. Who knows?
We would love to have him in San Antonio. I'm going to take you back a minute. I know you're doing the time and what must be done lecture series right now. I was watching last week, and they played a clip of the minister in Houston, 1994, and you were there. I said, that's Brother Robert. Now, when he introduced the concept, if you would, of the Million Man March, and what went through your, I've always wanted to ask you, what went through your mind when he said, I'm calling on 1 million black men to come to Washington, D.C.? What did you think? What went through your mind?
What went through my mind is I have to help him get those 1 million men, that his word shall be made bond, that the man can't stand on a world stage like that, call for 1 million men, and he have anything short than 1 million men. So we had to do our part in Houston, Texas. God blessed us in the city of Houston at that particular meeting on April 11th, 1994, over 35,000 men showed up to a church that could only hold 15,000. Another 20,000 just circled around the church, and because the broadcast or his speech was broadcast live on the radio, many of them sat out in cars in the parking lot and around just listening to the minister. There wasn't a fight, there wasn't an arrest, there wasn't a break-in, not a crime took place in and around that church. And it was a sign of what would take place in October, on October 16, 1995, at the Million Man March, where over nearly 2 million of us showed up, and there wasn't a fight, there wasn't an arrest, and we didn't leave. The place was cleaner, according to Mayor Barry's staff. The mall was cleaner than when we found it.
Well, we're going to have 20 years coming up soon, if my math serves me correct. 20 years coming up soon. What can we expect from 20 years later after the Million Man March? What can we expect?
Well, we can see that it is that mass movement that led to, in part, the reason why Barack Obama is president at this time. In truth, he was there as a state senator. He was there. And his criticism of the march was that there wasn't a necessary legislative agenda, like say perhaps there was at the March on Washington. But that wasn't the purpose of the march. But we can say that from that mass mobilization and the way we did it, he learned a lot, and he just did it 2.0, and now he became president and then was reelected again. So what we can see at the 20th anniversary of the Million Man March is the culmination of some of the work that's going to take place with the Muhammad Economic Blueprint, which is 5 cents a day, 35 cents a week, $1.40 a month, and $18.20 a year. If 16 million wage earners would just put that aside in the Treasury, we could have $291,200,000 in the National Treasury. And our first job is to begin to acquire agricultural land, timberland, clay land, and land so that we may supply our own needs and feed ourselves. So that is the first and foremost purpose of the Muhammad Economic Blueprint, and probably the accomplishments of what we've been able to do thus far will be announced at that march and where we're going from there.
Last question, I promise I'm going to ask you the last question. You just talked about, in the lecture you just gave, you talked about our young people. How is that message being received by our young people? And you said they're the leaders and teachers of us. How is that message being received, in particular our young college males? How is that message being received now, them being the leaders of the future?
Well, the Honorable Minister Louis Farrakhan has literally gone on a tour, if you will, of colleges. He's been to many colleges, Prairie View, A&M. He was at University of Arkansas, Pine Bluff. He went to Howard. He spoke at many of the black colleges and some of the white colleges as being invited by the black student unions. And what he sees them as the young colts. You see, our young educated class are the young colts that are tied up. They don't have any jobs for them, they have nothing for them to do. But also tied up to the young colts is the ass or the donkey, which is the unlearned masses of our people. So the master sent his disciples into the city, and he said, untie the young colt and ass. You'll find them there. Untie them, and if anybody asks you what you're doing with them, tell them the master has need of them. Since this society does have no need for us, whether we've got a PhD or not, there are people who are serving hamburgers at McDonald's with PhDs or in fact collecting food stamps. So education is not necessarily the guarantee to the career that we may have thought that we may have. So it is important that our people be given a vision of what the promised land that Dr. King spoke about that day on April the 3rd, 1968, the day before he was assassinated, that vision of the promised land. And it's up to the young colts, those wise youngsters to come and to lead the unlearned masses into the promised land. And so our speech earlier today and later on tonight will be to these young people to let them know that they're the Joshua and Caleb generation, and their job is to cross the Jordan River and to lead us into the promised land.
You've heard it live right here on Black Video News is 8. Minister Robert Muhammad, Student Minister Robert Muhammad, the Southwest Regional Minister of the Nation of Islam under the guidance of the Honorable Minister Louis Farrakhan. I'm your host, Dr. Mateen Diop, soon to be Dr. Minister Robert Muhammad.
Yes, sir.
Thank you for logging on. See you next time.